What's going on, guys? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today I am super excited because I finally got my hands on the all-new Rec Room Masters 24-inch Xtension Gameplay Jr arcade cabinet. Now this is an all-new cabinet from Rec Room Masters, and if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you know I own a few of their cabinets. I have their full-size 32-inch upright version. Favorite cabinet I've ever built, but they do get a bit expensive. I also own the I-PAC, which unfortunately Rec Room Masters no longer makes, and I guess they kind of phased it out for the 24-inch Junior because the I-PAC was a 3/4 size arcade machine and it was a bit small. But basically, the Gameplay Junior is just a taller version of the I-PAC, and I'm super excited to get this together. Another new change that Rec Room Masters has made to this is new firmware for the arcade encoder. We no longer have to jump through hoops to get this to work with Retropie. You just need to hit a few buttons to get it in the correct mode, and it will automatically detect player 1 and player 2. If you do end up ordering one of these, it's going to come in 3 different boxes, and luckily they all came on the same day, but in the past when ordering arcade machines, I've got a few parts on one day, and then the next day the other stuff showed up, so keep that in mind. Moving over to the website, they do offer several new colors for the 24-inch extension. We have blue, red, white, green, purple, yellow, orange, and I believe there's a black that you can order if you get down here to the drop menu. Yeah, there is a black you can order. This kit is $499 US. This does not come with your Raspberry Pi or PC, depending on what you want to run in this thing, and it does not come with the monitor itself. As the name suggests, you use a 24-inch monitor or TV in this thing. Now, I opted for a cheaper Insignia TV from Best Buy. I've used one in my previous build. It's 720p, around $69, and it works perfect for Retropie. And that's exactly what I'm going to be running in this smaller cabinet. On my bigger 32-inch extensions cabinet, I'm using LaunchBox with a little Ryzen-powered PC, and it works great, but I wanted something with Retropie installed, so I could set it up right next to it, or maybe even in the living room, because this is a bit smaller than that 32-inch version, and this thing looks great when it's all put together. So aside from the cabinet itself, I did need a few extras to get this up and running. First up, my Raspberry Pi. I'm going to be running Retropie on this thing. I'm just using a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus because nothing really great is available for the Pi 4 just yet. I might upgrade down the road, but all the arcade stuff I want to run on this cabinet runs fine on the Raspberry Pi 3. I also needed a micro SD card, so I'm using a cheap SanDisk 128GB card, a power supply for the Pi 3, 5 volts, 2.5 amps, an HDMI cable, and to keep everything cool, I opted for this armor case for the Raspberry Pi 3. You just place this on the Raspberry Pi. It's got a heatsink on the top and the bottom and 2 built-in fans, so this thing will never reach thermal throttle while it's inside of this cabinet. And one of the most important parts that you're going to need for this build is a 24-inch monitor or TV. Now, since I'm using a TV, I don't need to add extra speakers. It sounds fine with this little TV. I used pretty much the same TV in the I-PAC and it worked out fine. I originally was going to go with a 1080p Vizio, but unfortunately the way the cables are laid out in that, it just wouldn't have worked with this cabinet. I would have had to drill a few holes. You need to make sure that the HDMI ports are laid flat. They can't just be coming straight out of the back of the TV, or you'll have to drill some holes in the little mounting panel, and I really didn't want to do that. My favorite part about these Rec Room Master cabinets are the control panels. They use real SUZO HAPP buttons and sticks, plus Ultimark USB encoders, and with this new one, like I mentioned, they have new firmware installed on these USB encoders that easily allows you to connect both players to your Raspberry Pi running Retropie. So you no longer have to flash the firmware yourself or download different drivers on the Pi itself. It should just work right out of the box. So this is using the 2-player Ultimark I-PAC USB encoder, and it's really clean inside of here. You could go through and replace these buttons if you want to, but there's really no need to. These are real SUZO HAPP buttons, so they last a long time and they feel great. Assembly on this unit is very straightforward. They do have a full tutorial over on their website, and you can have this up and running in about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on your skill level. As you can see, it's a 2-part process. You'll assemble the bottom and then the top. And when it's all said and done, you'll have something that looks like this. I opted for the green version. Now these are light green buttons. I just think it looks really nice. It does have a lit marquee, and they do include the light for the marquee. Here's a quick size comparison. On the far left, I have the 32-inch full-size Xtensions arcade. Then we have the Burger Time Arcade 1-Up with the riser, the Arcade Junior, and finally, the Legends Ultimate Arcade on the far right. As you can see, the Arcade Junior is still a bit taller than the Arcade 1-Up, and we also have much more screen space here. And just because I'm here, I figured I'd go ahead and take the riser off the Arcade 1-Up. And here it is. I've got the controls all set up. I'm using that Raspberry Pi 3B Plus with a 128GB card, and I'm running an image by Wolfenoz. This is the Wolfenoz Arcade Remix. I usually just build my own image, but this has everything that I would have added anyway, and it's a really great image, especially for an arcade system like this. Now, I know a lot of people would rather run something with the track mode on here, but personally, I think it's just way too slow for the Raspberry Pi 3 or the 3B Plus, so I'm going to stick with Emulation Station and the Showcase theme. It's got everything I need, simple to use, and I think it looks great. So I'm going to swap back over to the Showcase theme, and then we'll get right into some gameplay. I'll probably go with CPS 3 first. I want to show you that both joysticks are working independently of each other. So here we are with some CPS 3. This is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I have my first player up and running. I've inserted coins for my second player, and we'll just test it out. I didn't have to install any extra drivers or anything like that. I just had to go into the menu and map my second player controller after I was done with the first one. And it does detect it as two separate controllers, even though we only have one USB arcade encoder. And by the way, this image that I'm using does have bezels for pretty much everything. Some of them will be generic main bezels, but it still looks better than just having a black border. And you definitely have enough room for two players on this control panel. You won't be bumping shoulders like you would on an arcade 1-up. To give you an idea of how well these controls work with fighters, I wanted to test out some Street Fighter. This is Third Strike, and it works perfectly fine. I mean, I was sure it would because these are real HAPP buttons. They're not generic Sanwa knockoffs or HAPP knockoffs, so you won't have any trouble pulling off your special moves with your fighting games. So this is a 24-inch monitor. I mean, it's not the biggest in the world, but I did want to test out a vertical shooter. As you can see, we have those generic main bezels here, but it still looks really good. And there's plenty of room here for vertical shrumps. So I'm going to go through and just test some of my favorite games. I mean, I know this is running the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, and everything that I test is going to run well, but I want to make sure it looks good and controls right with this setup. So I gotta say, this is perfect for a Raspberry Pi setup. Now, one thing that I hate about all of these arcade cabinets is the plexiglass panel on the front. I didn't even install it on the Junior, and that's because I have cats and this stuff just attracts all the cat hair. So this weekend I'm going to get some glass cut for the Junior and my Xtension's 32-inch cabinet. It would have been much easier just to wait until I got the glass cut, but I wanted to get this thing together. And by no means is the plexiglass bad. I mean, it'll definitely get you by. It's just a personal preference. I don't like it. I'd rather have glass on the front. My favorite part about all of Rec Room Master's cabinets are their panels. This thing is built tough. I got kids, they can beat on this all day. Real HAPP buttons. We also have that Ultimark encoder, which works perfectly now that we have that new firmware with the Raspberry Pi and Retropie. In the end, I can definitely recommend a cabinet like this, and I'm going to say it again, I've said it in previous videos. If you can build something like this, if you have a guy who can print you up stuff, if you can cut a piece of wood straight, if you can get it to look good, that's totally fine. But there are tons of people out there that just don't have the time, tools, or knowledge to build something like this from scratch, and buying a pre-built kit is definitely the way to go. And if you do end up getting one of these, I highly recommend just using a Raspberry Pi. You could even throw a Pandora's box in here if you'd like to, but I would recommend saving your PC build for a bigger cabinet like a 32-inch or even a 40-inch cabinet. Retropie works great with this control panel, looks fine on a 24-inch TV, and there are thousands and thousands of games that are fully playable. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. If you're interested in picking something like this up, I will leave links in the description. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. But like always, thanks for watching.